Hello, my name is Lubna and I'm presenting our paper What to the Muslim is an Internet Search, Digital Borders as Barriers to Information Seeking. And my co-author on this paper is Sucheta Ghoshal. In this paper, we show how information seeking, which is considered a ubiquitous task, can be accomplished in just a few moments using various web-based technologies, has geopolitical burdens for the users who are racialized and marginalized by the nation state and other structures of power. In Orientalist views of the West, as noted by the Palestinian-American academic and political activist Edward Said, Muslims are reduced to an other and Islam to a particularly narrow and constricted semantic field that is to be looked at with a very special hostility and fear. Since 9/11, Muslims as a group have been uniquely racialized not only in the United States but also around the Western world, making them hypervisible. Although previous works in information studies discussed information search strategies and have also highlighted some barriers to information seeking, such as language problems, institutional barriers, lack of social and economic capital, they do not consider the hostility of the information environment and concerns about racialized state surveillance as barriers to accessible information even when it is available online. In this paper, we explore how Muslims as a racialized category experience information communication technologies when seeking information in the US. Through this qualitative interview study, we answered the following research questions in the context of Muslims residing in the US. What are some needs and patterns, practices, and barriers experienced while using ICTs for information seeking? How do experiences of surveillance and immigration influence the practices and perceptions of web-based information seeking? Our work on digital borders draws from three bodies of work: privacy and information seeking, border studies, surveillance, and governmentality. For this presentation, we'll deep dive into border studies and governmentality specifically. An important concept that we build our work on is governmentality. It refers to the conduct or how governments conduct people towards certain behaviors. The technologies of governmentality include disciplinarian power and control mechanisms. And although disciplinarian powers lead to certain consequences, control mechanisms are less explicit and nudge people towards certain desirable behaviors while avoiding undesirable ones. The racialization of Muslims as others and labeling them as terrorists exercises both these kinds of control and governmentality, and the surveillance of citizens is a means of exercising this governmentality. We build our work on border studies literature, which shows how borders are to be viewed for analytical purposes and how they are enacted beyond the physical. For instance, Johnson et al. Invited scholars to think of borders in terms of place of enactment, performance of border work, perspectives, and politics of the border work. Chevalier introduced the concept of border imperialism and states that borders are less about the politics of movement per se and better understood as key method of imperial state formation, hierarchical social ordering, labor control, and xenophobic nationalism. One of the key strategies of border enforcement is the territorial diffusion, which refers to the internalization of the border such that they do not end when a person crosses a physical border, but can be enforced anywhere in the nation state. A consequence of territorial diffusion is then border internalization, which is the creation of a ubiquitous regime of bordering enacted through racialized surveillance, instilling fear of the everyday. We bring this body of literature on border and border imperialism in conversation with HCI. Our findings show patterns of technology use and non-use that emerge when borders are internalized by Muslim users. For our study, we interviewed 15 participants of varying ages, years lived in US, and citizenship or immigration statuses, all self-identifying as Muslims. Most of our participants belong to South Asian origin and were college educated. Participants were recruited from the First Authors Social Circle through referrals from Muslim and non-Muslim friends and colleagues, by posting calls for recruitment to Muslim student associations into US-based universities, and snowballing from existing participants. My experiences as a Muslim helped develop a deeper understanding during participant interactions and helped build rapport. Through interactive way of interviewing, sharing my experiences that motivated the study helped us move from the distance observer to the feeling participant and learn about the participant experiences and emotions. Both researchers' positionality as non-immigrants and as a first author as a Muslim made us vigilant around any concerns participants might have about data storage and use of data. Before moving forward to findings, I'll point out some limitations of our study. The study was conducted in the US, that has a unique combination of privacy law, surveillance capitalism, Islamophobia, and racism. Moreover, all but two participants in our study were Muslims of South Asian origin. Muslims in the US belong to varying races, locations, educational and career backgrounds, gender identities, all of which can vary their experiences and perceptions. Therefore, the experiences of Muslims of South Asian origin in the US might not be generalizable to other Western or non-Muslim countries where Muslims are in minority, or to other groups of Muslims in the US. Now I will share the findings from our study. Almost all of our participants, both citizens and non-immigrants, believe that surveillance is part of their lives in the US, something that they have accepted as a reality. One of the participants, P5, who was a citizen born, specifically shared that they expect the US to have a keen eye on the Muslims, and further explained, I think I have zero privacy. I am sure the government is not interested in me as an individual. I go on about my daily life, but if they wanted anything, they could have it from the press of a button. Participants, in reflecting on their anxieties related to information seeking on the internet, cited several incidents or details of their visa application and interview process where they felt discriminated against as Muslims and faced privacy breaches while crossing the US border. Participant P15, who is a naturalized citizen, cited two incidents at the US border 15 years apart where her family was subjected to added surveillance because they were Muslims. The first incident was around the database with names of Muslim male immigrants. P15 shared, there was a registry of all Muslim men that were living in the States and were not US citizens at the time. And so you had to register yourself every single time you would go out of the country and then coming back into the country. My dad didn't know about this rule, and because it was not well known, when we returned, the entire family was detained. A second incident, which took place 15 years later, involved device inspections at the border as she was randomly stopped and searched at the airport when returning from Turkey. The search involved officers going through her phones, laptops, and social media profiles. P15 shared, if they need a warrant to get into your house, how is it possible that they don't need a warrant to access your technology? Another concern among participants was around misinterpretation of their search histories. Multiple participants shared concerns about their search history potentially being misinterpreted or misrepresented, not only because they're Muslims but also because they are first or second generation Pakistani immigrants or non-immigrants. They were aware that Pakistan is perceived by the US in a particularly negative light. Participants with technical backgrounds drew on their technical understanding of the web searches and browsing to make changes to their web search practices. P1, who is a non-immigrant, shared that I've seen myself sometimes rephrasing my words in my head so that, I hope I'm not triggering something, because I feel like there is a tendency to misrepresent and misinterpret. Multiple participants, including citizens, permanent residents, and non-immigrants, shared concerns or expected to be surveyed about looking for politically sensitive topics such as abortion, Palestine, and terrorism. Concerns were raised about how this knowledge might be used by someone monitoring their search activity. The entities that they expected to have access to their search activity included the government, foreign governments with whom the US government shared their data, and IT network administrators in their hotels or organizations. P2 and other non-immigrants shared their concerns as follows. Before moving here, I'm used to consume news a lot. I'm mindful of what news article I'm clicking on now. I'm scared, so I used to read and still read the Express Tribune to read the news from back home. If there is any article, for example, TTP attacked a particular area in Pakistan, I don't always open that article anymore. Now I will discuss how our participants conceptualized and made sense of their datafied and surveilled selves. Participants with technical, educational, and professional backgrounds reported on events of being seen as data. This conceptualization required taking a view from the government's perspective of what data the US government might have or might be continuously collecting about participants, how that might come across to any entity or person monitoring their activity, and how and why the information on participants might be used. Building on the conceptualization of data relationships, P1 also thinks of how much data the US government has on her diaspora, the people with not only her specific religion but also national identity. She explained, They don't have a lot of data points from that country. I have met a lot of other people from neighboring countries, but they don't have a lot of us here, which doubles the problem. During interviews, participants actively reflected on the rationality of their concerns. In addition, a wide range of concerns were shared in these interviews. Some participants rationalized their lack of concern about information seeking by noting that they rarely searched for religious information or sensitive topics, so being monitored was not really a concern for them. Other participants rationalized their concerns by connecting with socio-political events that impact Muslim community in the United States as a whole. P5 shared the potential use of data in the future is if attention turns to Muslims for any reason. I will give you an example of why I am concerned. There is no telling when the government and its policy will change from time to time. When Roe v. Wade was turned over, some of the women were concerned about their data on period tracking apps. For some reason, that particular data is not protected under HIPAA. There are some concerns around if someone wanted to prosecute these women using that data for getting abortion, they can do that. After 9/11, when Bush passed the Patriot Act, it gave the government a ridiculous amount of access to data. It was clearly targeting Muslims. Nothing is stopping the government from accessing it if they ever wanted it. Any government prosecutor can access this data at any time. Participants came up with multiple ways to mitigate their concerns. We will discuss one of them. Our participants self-censored during the search. They avoided searching sensitive topics, rephrased search terms, and managed their history appearances during travels. As a workaround to the concern of lack of tolerance in different states, participants self-censored their expression of Muslim identity within their search activity. Participants like P1 held off on searching for religious topics while traveling through the more conservative states. She explained, I think it was something semi-religious, not like fully religious. I know that all hotels and networks are public. I was searching and I thought, do I need to search it here? I'm not sure how everybody would react to it. Now I will discuss the implications of our findings for the HCI community. We argue that our participants experience ICTs as an extension of physical borders. As suggested by border studies scholars, seeing like a border involves considering the places where borders are enacted. Extended Walia's argument on elasticity of borders, we show that digital borders are elastic and follow our participants around wherever they are connected to the internet and seeking information. They're temporally elastic as the political climate also affects how they're experienced and expected by the participants. They are spatially elastic as they can convert or converge into the physical border when traveler devices are inspected at the airports. They are geographically elastic as they are coincidental with participants' first interaction with the US visa and immigration processes in their home countries, but also because the global hegemony of surveillance capitalism allows visa approval or disapproval to be linked to search histories and social media activities. Borders have the ability to grant and restrict movement. We demonstrate that digital borders are also control mobility not only in the physical realm but also across cyberspace by rendering some topics, applications, websites, communities, and search behaviors potentially risking profiling and surveillance, prosecution, and deportation for Muslims in the US. Digital borders internalize governmentality. By policing themselves, our participants internalize borders and perform border work themselves by creating boundaries as to which information and information sites they can or cannot access. Digital borders have epistemic implications for our participants. The resultant chilling effects of surveillance in the form of self-censoring and restrictive information seeking lead to epistemic injustice for Muslims living in the US, limiting their participation in the knowledge circles. Muslims as knowers are marginally socially situated in the US, making them vulnerable to capitalistic and government surveillance through search systems, creating a heightened sense of the resulting effects. On one hand, their interdependence on the knowledge accessible through these engines created by dominant groups makes this knowledge less suited for their information needs. On the other hand, the self-censorship and limitations to freely access information without any fear of criminalization as chilling effects of surveillance prevent them from effectively participating in these knowledge circles, both as knowers and contributors. Driven by neoliberal and racial logics, borders affect different groups differently. In our study, we demonstrate how Muslims, a racialized and marginalized group in US, experience search engines as digital borders. The connection between borders and online search affects mobility not only at physical borders but also across online spaces. We urge social computing and HCI researchers to pay special attention to the ways in which ICTs perpetuate border imperialism, further isolating and otherizing the already racialized.